Hi everyone, Drogner here. Got another tech video for you here today. Today we're going to be looking at making a useful modification to your Milsig magazine shells. Now, if you're like me and at the end of each event you break your magazines down, you clean them out in order to make sure that you don't have any feed issues, what you may have found is over time your magazine shells end up looking like this with the screw bosses here starting to break apart. The reason for this is because of course the magazine shells, they use self-tapping screws. Now, not a lot of people are aware of the fact that when you're using self-tapping screws, when you're taking them out and putting them back in again, the way you're supposed to put them back in again is you put them in the slot, you wind it anti-clockwise until you find the starting of the screw thread, and then you screw them in. And when you do actually screw them in, don't do them up too tight, otherwise this ends up occurring. A lot of people simply put them in, then tighten them up again, not realizing that they're cutting a brand new thread into the plastic, which results in this occurring. If you do put the screws back in properly, as in you wind them back and you put them back in the thread, the correct thread each time, you can prolong the life of your magazines, but I found that eventually this still does occur. So what I've done to my magazines is I've done this here with these brass threaded inserts here. These are metal bushings that I put in. This allows me to use machine screws in my magazine shells rather than the self-tapping screws, which basically means that my magazine shells will last much longer and I don't have to replace these. So in order to do this, what you need is you need to get hold of some brass inserts and your machine screws. These are M5 by 16 button head socket cap screws that I'm using, and of course the brass inserts are M5 knurled inserts. These are M5 by 8.3mm. In order to do this modification, you're going to need obviously the Allen key for doing up your machine screws. This is a 2.5mm. You're also going to need a power drill and a 6mm drill bit to go in it, and you're also going to need a soldering iron in order to heat up the inserts to actually press them in. So let's get started. Let's break a magazine open. This is actually some magazines that I'm doing for a friend of mine. You may know him. His name is Barker. He's a fellow YouTuber. Sorting out his magazines for him today. Let's lift all of the internals out of the way. Give us a clean up whilst I'm at it. And we want this half of the magazine shell here. Now, something to note here, if you open up your magazine shells and you find that they're already starting to crack, they're already starting to break, don't try and do this modification. When you try and drill out the inserts here for actually press the brass inserts in, if you try and drill out cracked screw bosses here, they're just going to break apart. So this magazine shell needs replacing before we can make this modification. Okay, so here we go, we've got one broken open, we're ready to start making the modification. Now, before we start making the modification, I've said that I'm using M5 inserts. Depending on which manufacturer you go for will determine the sort of outside diameter of the insert, how deep the insert is, all those sorts of things, which have an effect on the hole that you're going to drill. So it's always a good idea, before you get started, to measure the inserts that you're going to use to make sure you drill your hole correctly. So, first things first, double check the depth of the insert. These are 8.3mm, that's 8.31, which is good. And also check the overall diameter, because of course you're going to have to drill a pilot hole for these to go in, and you don't want to drill the hole too large. So that's about 6.54 there. Obviously the manufacturer will normally give instructions as to what sort of size hole to drill for these, what sort of size drill bit and how deep to do it, but it's always a good idea to do your own checking. Measure twice, cut once. So what I've actually done on my drill here is I've actually put a little tape flag here to tell me when to stop drilling. So I don't drill these holes overly deep. What I'm going to do now actually is I'm going to quickly modify the camera position to bring it down lower so you can actually see what it is that I'm doing here. Okay, so we've got our magazine shell, got the soldering iron on, that's here heating up nicely. What we're going to do now is we're literally going to take the drill bit, and we're going to simply drill out the threads here. And all we're literally doing is we're literally just polishing away the plastic thread in the holes here. I'll do the other one quickly. Try and keep a better grip on it this time. And again, using that tape flag there to make sure we don't drill the hole too deep. There we go. That's the hole sorted. What we now want to do is position our metal bushing. Now, what you may find is when you're trying to press these in, is that they don't want to stay in place correctly. So you can use a pair of pliers just to gently hold them in place. Something to be aware of though is obviously you're going to be applying heat through this insert. So of course you don't want to grip the metal bush too tightly. If you grip it too tightly, the pliers will act like a giant heat sink and they'll draw heat away from the bush. So don't grip them too tight. Take your soldering iron, press it into the top, and then allow that to heat up. And as it does heat up, it'll melt the plastic and the insert will go in all the way home. Again, try and keep it as straight as possible. You want it to be nice and perpendicular to the magazine shell. And you want to press it in so it's just under flush. There we go. As you can see, that one there's gone in nicely. That's still a little bit proud. Push it in a bit further. There we go. And we'll do the other one whilst we're at it. You may find you need to apply a little bit of force behind it. Don't apply too much though, obviously you don't want to damage the threads. And there we go. There are your brass bushings, both fitted. So with that done, let's clean up this magazine shell and let's reassemble it. Okay, so let's take the other half of our shell here. This is a quick wipe down. And the other half as well. This is a silicone lubricant that I'm using here. It's good. I find it works extremely well in the magazine shells. It provides a really smooth track for the paintballs to flow in. Gives a really nice polish finish to the plastic. Helps to prevent jams and hang-ups, which is obviously much nicer when you don't have those. Let's work that into there. Let's take our locating pins. Put them in. Take our winding mechanism and the plastic noodle. Position that. The wire guide the other side of the plate. Hold that in place. There that goes. Take our collar. Clean out the inside of that. Make sure the detent is flowing smoothly. Make sure that's not getting stuck. Fit it over the head of the mag. Crack open the top. and back in it goes, like so. Now we take our new machine screws and 5x16 screws. Bear in mind, of course, if you use slightly different depth brass inserts for this, you may find that you need slightly shorter or maybe even potentially longer screws. So again, always check and measure what it is that you're using. And in those go, and you can do these up as tight as you like. Well, I say that, don't do it over tight, you don't want to rip the your new insert out, but then again, it is pretty strong. And there you have it. Let's quickly wind that up. Let's make sure that's flowing nicely. Hit the return catch, and there we go. There you go, that's how you modify your magazines. If you do that, your magazine shells will last much longer, and in theory, you will never ever have to replace them. Hope you've enjoyed this video, hope you've learned a lot, and hope this helps you. See you next time.